Order. Question number 6. Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister responsible for Housing New Zealand Corporation. Does he still intend to sell 1,000 to 2,000 Housing New Zealand houses by January 2016, and that houses will not be transferred unless tenants get better services and taxpayers get fair and reasonable value?
My phone.
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, in January the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "These areas, the areas where we will transfer the first houses, will be determined after engagement and consultation, including with community housing providers and iwi, to ensure we understand everyone's rights and interests. We'll then look to sell between 1,000 and 2,000 Housing New Zealand properties over the following year for use as social housing run by approved community housing providers," end quote. So it is unlikely to be by January 2016, but it is by the timetable that we had previously laid out. In answer to the second part of the question, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Will he tell the public who the community housing providers are that the government is considering selling to in Tauranga and Invercargill? Or does he agree with Paula Bennett that his policy is now so toxic that, quote, it would be a poisoned chalice for them, unquote?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, I certainly think that any comments like that by Paula Bennett have been taken completely out of context. So what I will say is that the answer to the question from the member is yes, and in fact just in last week we had more than 160 different people at meetings with Treasury about transactions, and that will be made public on the website towards the end of the week.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Is forcing our most vulnerable New Zealanders, including the elderly, the disabled and people with mental illnesses, to pay their rent to an Australian company part of the compassionate conservatism he was bragging about at budget time?
Mr Speaker,
the Honourable Paula Bennett.
On behalf of the Minister, what I would say is that it seems that what the member believes is that the status quo for those very people is good enough, and we don't think it is on this side of the House. So we think we can provide them with better housing and better services around them. We want more of those, and that is the commitment that we on this side make to those people that want it.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
What advice has he had that cashing up the State House portfolio in a fire sale to Australians or giving them away free to iwi will improve the government's books and better protect the most vulnerable New Zealanders?
Mr Speaker,
the Honourable Paula Bennett.
On behalf of the Minister, neither of those things are happening. So let me make it very, very clear that neither of those things are happening. What we are looking at is doing what the very member himself has said both in this House and publicly, is that actually growing the community housing providers is better for vulnerable New Zealanders. And that is the commitment that we make. And actually looking at building the asset base of some of those community housing providers so that they can provide better services is completely the motivation behind the work program of this government.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Which of his 3 excuses so far is the most credible? That the houses are in the wrong place and the wrong size, and that will be magically fixed by selling them? That the Salvation Army and iwi are keen as mustard to buy the houses? Or that local groups can do a better job than Wellington, but he's now selling the houses to Brisbane?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I think what needs to be clear on behalf of the Minister is that there is a number of criteria that any purchaser would have to go through, and one of them being a local presence and their ability to actually look after those tenants better. So we have a number of community organisations already that are actually international organisations, and they have branches throughout regional New Zealand and in our cities, and that's exactly what it is. And I know the member himself thinks that this is as good as it gets for those tenants. We believe that it can get better.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Is he aware that the Dominion Post has described his State House sell-off as bizarre and muddled, And if so, will he follow Nick Smith's example and set them straight by organising a magical mystery bus tour for the media to show them the houses that he wants to flog off to the Australians?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, no, I don't agree with that on behalf of the Minister. What I do believe is that we are putting the interests of New Zealanders and tenants first. And that member can go on and get on the sort of muddled hierarchy if they like to, but actually it is about providing better services for New Zealanders, and that is exactly what we are intending to do.
Question number 7, Materia Tuve.